Hello, what's up, dear YouTube viewers? The World Cup is over. We already know who will be the winner for third place game and the world champions. Spain ended up winning it all, like many people predicted. This is probably the first time in history that the country who many people predicted to be the favorites ended up winning the tournament. And I ended up correctly predicting the final, and just about what I predicted happened, where Spain scored one, and then instead of shutting down like England, they tried to score more. And at the end, they ended up winning the match. But even before that prediction, at the start, I made my pre-World Cup predictions, where I ranked all 48 teams based on how much chances to win the World Cup they had, where 48th place had the least chances and first place had the most chances. So in this video, I will be reacting to the predictions that I made. Now, I have made some really good predictions, such as about Mexico, Switzerland, or about Spain winning the World Cup, but also some really bad predictions, such as about Uruguay or Turkey. So in this video, I will be reacting to my predictions and explaining why I ended up flopping with some teams where I ended up flopping, as well as maybe praising myself for teams where I guessed correctly where they would finish. Okay, let's start. So at number 48, I placed Iraq. And this is one of the few things that I got correct. One of those things, not few of course, but I also didn't get everything correct, but this is one of the things I got correct. Iraq finished bottom in their group, and statistically they ended up being the worst team of the tournament, having a goal difference of -11. However, I still think that Iraq can be proud of the tournament they had, given the group that they were placed in. To give you a perspective, they were placed in the group with the fourth place of the tournament France, Norway, who eliminated Brazil themselves, and Senegal, who came close to eliminating Belgium. So I think, considering the group they were in, the fact that they finished rock bottom is not a shame. And to be fair, in two of their three games, they ended up showing really good game. In the first game against Norway, they kept the score 1-1 for a long time, and even though they ended up losing 4-1 at the end, they still had their own chances, but were just not lucky enough to finish them. In the game against France, they lost 3-0, but considering how good France is, I think it's not bad, especially given that even my own home country of Ukraine have lost to France with their worst scoreline. This is given that they have better players. The only game where I would say that Iraq could have done better, and where I think Iraq didn't show good game, is the game against Senegal, where they got absolutely destroyed 5-0. But to be fair, it was partially because of a red card given to an Iraqi player. So I think, considering the group that they were in, and considering that they ended up showing some good moments in the game, I don't think the results were that bad. Sure, I wouldn't say they had a good tournament, but I also wouldn't call it bad. I think the Iraqis can be proud of what they have achieved. I think, given that the World Cup tournament got expanded, we will see Iraq more often at the World Cup. And maybe potentially, in the future, if they are placed in an easier group, they will win more matches. Okay, at number 47th place, I got Jordan. Now I have to be honest, even though Jordan finished rock bottom, they ended up exceeding my expectations because they scored one goal against each of their opponents, even against Argentina, when even teams like Austria and Algeria were not able to score against them. So I think it's an admirable achievement. And sure, Argentina didn't have much to play for at this point because they already guaranteed themselves first place, but their squad was still not bad. So I think Jordan actually exceeded my expectations because in all three of their matches, it didn't look like a favorite was playing an outsider. It looked like two equal teams playing. In the game against Austria, they kept the score 1-1 for a long time, and even at the end, Austria barely beat them. Against Algeria, they even had the lead for some time, although eventually ended up losing. And like I said before, even against Argentina, they were able to score a goal. So I think they actually had a better tournament than many people expected. I absolutely think that given that football is on the rise in Jordan, Jordan will qualify for more World Cups in the future and maybe even make it out of the group stage someday. I think given that they were the debutant in this tournament, they did decent. Okay, at number 46, I had Haiti. Now, Haiti also ended up showing some good results. They barely lost to Scotland, and against Morocco, they kept the score 2-0. They kept the score 1-0 and then 2-1 for some time. So I think their tournament also was not bad. Now, I think the players they naturalized, like for example Isidore, didn't show what many people thought he would show, although he did end up having one goal. He didn't show something in other games, but Haiti had some really tough opponents. So I think that considering the opponents they have, they still had good results. In the future, unfortunately, I don't expect Haiti to qualify for a World Cup because North America only gets 3 qualification spots. And this time they were lucky that the 3 biggest powerhouses of football qualified automatically, but it will not happen in the next 4 years. So, unfortunately for anyone from Haiti, I don't think that they will qualify for the next World Cup. I could absolutely be wrong because I was wrong with many of my predictions before, like I already told you. But as of right now, this is what I think. Now, I still think that Haiti will qualify for maybe the CONCACAF Gold Cup and maybe will get far, maybe even to the quarterfinal. Especially given that they will naturalize players like Asu Eduard and others who refuse to play for Haiti right now because they didn't want to take a place of someone who participated in qualifying but could do it in the future. Okay, number 5 I had Curacao. And this is the first team I had who actually ended up getting a point against Ecuador. Although they did end up finishing 4th like I predicted. Now, I think, like I said with all the other teams before, Curaçao's tournament wasn't that bad. They got a point, and against Germany, sure they lost 7-1, but they at least tried to attack, and they had their own moments. This is what important, is that like, sometimes even if a team loses, if they showed some good results, and they at least tried their best, it's better if a team just parks the bus and still ends up losing. So I think Curacao could be proud of the tournament they had. Unfortunately, like I said about Haiti, I don't think that Curacao will qualify next time, simply because North America has only three quotas, and the United States, Mexico, and Canada will not get automatic spots. But I still think that what Curacao did was admirable. And who knows, maybe next time they could show some good results in the CONCACAF Gold Cup. Okay, at number 44, I placed South Africa. And this was my first massive flop. I predicted for South Africa to finish rock bottom and to lose all of their three games. And at first it actually did look like that, because they lost to Mexico 2-0, and it could have been 4-0 had it not been for Owen Williams. But then at the end, they got their point against Czechia after a penalty, and then somehow beat South Korea. I absolutely wasn't expecting that. Now, to be fair, of course, partially it was due to luck. Because Mexico was able to beat Czechia with a big scoreline, and South Korea just didn't end up placing the right squad. But I still think that South Africa advanced not just due to luck, but also due to some players of their own, such as Robin Williams and Bakazi. I'm very interested to see where will Bakazi end up. Now, sure, South Africa ended up losing to Canada, but the fact that they kept the score 1-0 for a long time, I think is still good. So for me, like I said with everyone before, I think South Africa can be proud of getting out of the group stage. Or can be proud of the tournament that they have. I think the reason why I ended up flopping with them is because I didn't estimate South Korea correctly, and I didn't expect for South Korea to not beat them. And I didn't expect for Son Heung-min to not score a single goal. But that is something we'll talk about in the future when talking about South Korea. Okay, number 43, I had Qatar. Now, I wasn't expecting much from Qatar. Even though they were not in the hardest group, I still thought that they would lose all their three matches. But they ended up surprising everyone and tied against Switzerland. Considering the fact that Switzerland made it all the way to the quarterfinals, I think it's an admirable achievement. Although Qatar finished rock bottom, I would not hate on them too much, because what matters is that they made progress. Last time they didn't get a single point and only qualified because they were the host. Now they actually won a qualification campaign and they got their first point, so progress matters. I do think that in the future Qatar might eventually get even higher, although it will take some time. Okay, at number 42, I had Saudi Arabia. Now, I said that Saudi Arabia will finish bottom of the group because the Saudi government's strategy to sign players from Europe is just not working, and in fact ends up harming the system, because players who once got a lot of time in their clubs now sit on the bench and came to the team untrained. And I was actually correct about that. Saudi Arabia finished bottom. Although they had a good game against Uruguay, where they were able to keep the score 1-1, after that they completely lost to Spain and then tied with Cape Verde. I don't think that the situation was super bad considering the group that they were in, but I still think that Saudi Arabia needs to change something in their strategy and think about changing. And I actually correctly predicted that Saudi Arabia would finish bottom, although I thought that Cape Verde would actually beat them and Cape Verde tied with them. Okay, at number 40, I had Paraguay. Oh, sorry, Panama. And once again, I was correct. Panama finished bottom of the table, but they honestly exceeded my expectations because they only conceded 4 goals, even though didn't score anything themselves. When last time they conceded much more. I think in the future Panama could get their first point, although it will take time and patience. I'm really hopeful that their current coach will stay with them and that they will give him more time. He already led them to 2 World Cups, who knows, maybe he can lead them to 3 next time. And maybe next time they can finally get their first point, because as we saw with football project, when coaches are given time, they sometimes produce good results. For example, we saw that with Arteta at Arsenal and De La Fuente in Spain. So I think that if Panama gives their current coach more time, they might actually get their first World Cup point next time. Okay, number 39, I had on number 39, I had Paraguay. And this was another one of my flops. Paraguay actually exceeded my expectations twice. First, they made it out of the group stage, and then they beat Germany. Many people are saying they got lucky, but like I said before, luck is part of football. So I think that they did the best that they could with their resources. The only thing that I don't like about them is how dirty they played against France. I understand that they were not the favorites and they wanted to win, but at the end they still end up losing. Like I said before, I think it's better to play. I think it's better to play fairly and to lose than to try to play dirty and still lose like Paraguay at the end did. But I think it's not the fault of Paraguay, it's the fault of the referee who didn't give them the yellow card that they deserved. However, regardless, I still think that what Paraguay achieved was admirable. I think the number one reason why I flopped with them is because I wasn't expecting for Turkey to have as poor of the performance as they had. Although that is something I will say when talking about Turkey. Okay, number 38, I had New Zealand. Now, I didn't want to put New Zealand too low because I knew that they had some good players like Chris Wood, but something told me that given the group they are in, all other teams in that group are better. At first, New Zealand didn't actually look so bad. They made the score 2-0 against Iran twice, and even against Egypt they got the lead. But then they ended up losing to both Egypt and Belgium and got first place like I predicted them to. Now, I think New Zealand fans still have something to be optimistic about. Because because they scored a goal in against each of their opponents who they played. So I think that is something to be proud of. I also think that given that we got an expanded World Cup and Oceania will now get an automatic qualification spot, we will definitely see New Zealand more often, because I just don't see anyone challenging them in Oceania. I think that in the future New Zealand might do even better. Oh, and by the way, shout out to Elijah Just, who ended up impressing everyone in this World Cup and doing actually even better than Chris Wood. Okay, at number 37, I had Iran. Given the situation that Iran is in, I wasn't expecting for them to show off good results, because they didn't end up taking Serdar Azmoun, and Donald Trump decided not to allow them to stay in the US like he did to all other teams, and made them fly to Mexico in all days except the days of their match, which in my opinion was unjust. But that is something I will talk about in another video, where I will say my likes and dislikes at this World Cup. Now Iran didn't make it out of the group stage, but I think given the group and the situation they were in, they did a great job, because they didn't have Serdar Azmoun, who is one of their best players. They were not allowed to stay in the USA every time. And the group they were in, let's be honest, it wasn't the hardest, but it also wasn't the easiest. Belgium sure are not as good as they were before, but they are still a top powerhouse in Europe. Egypt had a much better squad than them on paper, and even New Zealand wasn't super bad. And they actually fought for that spot very hard and didn't end up losing a single match. So I think given the tough group they were in, and I'm saying it's a tough group because everyone who made it out of this group ended up having a very good run. Egypt almost stopped Argentina, and Belgium almost stopped Spain, who were the finalists and the champions of this tournament. So I think given the teams they were with, and given their situation, they can be proud of what they have achieved. I hope that in 4 more years Iran will actually take their best players and they will be allowed to stay in the host country all the time, not just in days of the match. And next time they will achieve more. But for now, unfortunately, they didn't get out of the group stage. But again, I still think they ended up showing good results. Although I think that if Azmoun was in the squad, they could have beaten New Zealand and made it out of the group stage. But that is a topic for another video. Okay, number 36, I had Uzbekistan. I was predicting for Uzbekistan to finish bottom, but I thought they would at least put up really good attempt. And to be fair, they tried the best that they could. First they equalized with Colombia, and even though they ended up missing 2 later, it was still a good game considering that Colombia had a much better squad. In a game against DR Congo, they also ended up scoring a goal, and even in the game against Portugal, they scored 1 goal, but unfortunately it was disallowed due to offside. For me, I feel like experience was really something that Uzbekistan team lacked, because we can see that Uzbek players were still inexperienced and didn't know how to play against those tough teams like Portugal or Colombia. But I think, given that the World Cup is being expanded, we will see Uzbekistan more. And next time they will do better. So, I think, given that it was their first time, there is no reason to hate them. But hopefully next time they will do better. Again, next at number 35, I had Tunisia. Now, Tunisia ended up performing worse than I expected. Sure, they were placed in a tough group with the Netherlands, who some people were saying will win the World Cup, Sweden with Alexander Isak and Victor Gyökeres, and Japan. So I wasn't expecting them to top the group, and I was actually even expecting them to finish bottom. But I was at least expecting them to show off some good results and try their best, like they did in the game against, like Uzbekistan or New Zealand did, for example. But instead, they ended up losing all of their three matches with a scoreline with a greater than 2 goals difference. First, an absolute 4-1 loss to Sweden, then 4-0 loss to Japan, and then a 3-1 loss to the Netherlands. And firing their coach in the middle didn't do much good for them. Eventually, they ended up appointing an Evgeny Nar, and I was hopeful that maybe in the future he can do something for that team. Maybe he can show off some results in the next World Cup if they give him time. But unfortunately, they ended up not staying with him. I really don't know what to say about Tunisian Federation of Football. Sorry to anyone from Tunisia watching me. I don't wanna hate your team. You guys have good players, but your federation really needs to think about where they are heading. 6 coaches changed in the last couple of years. Come on, this is not how football works. We already saw what happened when teams change coaches rapidly with Chelsea. So, again, I think Tunisia has a decent team, but their Federation of Football really needs to think about where they are heading and finally find the right coach to show off some results and give him time. Okay, number 34, I had DR Congo. Now, DR Congo actually ended up exceeding my expectations. They ended up being eliminated in the round of 32, just like I expected, but I was expecting them to lose the game against Portugal. And instead, they actually ended up tying that game. And even against England, they scored 1 goal and could have scored another. But Johan Visa ended up not scoring in the right place, which of course it's not just his fault. It's the entire team could have done better to create him a chance, but I still think that their run was better than I expected, because they ended up trying their hardest against England and only missed the winning goal at the last moment. England really had a tough test against DR Congo. Okay, number 33, I had Ghana. Now, given the situation they were in, I wasn't expecting much from Ghana because Mohamed Kudus got injured and Thomas Partey wasn't allowed a visa to Canada. So, so I was expecting them to do even worse. And the situation only worsened when Antoine Semenyo didn't ended up showing what many people expected from him. However, even with this situation, Ghana found a way out with players like Thomas Partey in their other two games and Caleb Yarenki, who I think will go to a more higher status club. So I think considering the situation Ghana was in, they achieved more than I expected. I'm hopeful that in 4 years, Mohamed Kudus does not miss the World Cup and maybe they will be in an easier group and they can achieve more. For now, I think what they have achieved was very good because they tied with England, beat Panama, and only barely lost to Croatia and Colombia, who were supposed to be better teams on paper. Okay, next I had Algeria. Now I had to be honest, Algeria didn't live up to the expectations that I was expecting from them. Sure, they got third place with 4 points and only barely lost to Switzerland, so it wasn't that bad. However, something I didn't like with Algeria is that when they had a top opponent, they didn't try to put up a good game. For example, I expected them to score at least one goal against Argentina, even if losing that game, but instead they ended up completely losing 3-0. Against Jordan, they just barely won, and against Austria, they drew 3-3, but Austria looked like the better team. So I was expecting for Algeria to do better, especially given how good they did at the AFCON. People were even speculating that Vladimir Petkovic purposefully surrendered the game to Switzerland because he was a Switzerland coach before, although I of course don't think so. Now, I still think Algeria do have something to be optimistic for because Ibrahim Maza ended up showing some good stats and they also have some other players like Rayyan Al Nouri. However, next time I think they should prepare more. Okay, next I had Scotland. Scotland was another team that ended up doing worse than I expected from them. Sure, I wasn't expecting from them to get ahead of Morocco and Brazil, but I was at least expecting them to try their best. Instead, they only barely beat Haiti and lost to both Brazil and Morocco. And McTominay ended up not scoring a single goal. Now, I don't blame him because McTominay just can't be like Messi or Mbappe and carry the team along on his shoulders. He is a good player, but he needs a team. He can't just be the only player on the field. So honestly, I don't think McTominay is the one to blame for Scotland's failures. I think that at the end, his teammates didn't do enough to help him. But at the end, I think considering that Scotland beat Denmark, they could have done better at this World Cup. Although I wouldn't say they did completely bad. Okay, number 30, I had Australia. Now, Australia actually exceeded my expectations. I was expecting them to be third place after the after Turkey and the USA, or maybe USA and Turkey, depending on how the situation turns out. But actually they ended up being second place. And I think it's not bad considering that Turkey had a better squad. Although they got eliminated by Egypt, at the end I still think it wasn't that bad, given that they got second place. The only thing is I wonder why Tony Popovich decided to give a 19 years old the chance to score a penalty. I think that if Australia had more experienced players, they could have done better against Egypt. If the penalty was scored by an experienced player instead of players like those 19 years old. Okay, number 29, I had Canada. Canada actually exceeded my expectations. I knew that they were one of the hosts, but I still didn't think they would beat Bosnia, considering that Bosnia beat Italy themselves. But at the end, they ended up getting second place ahead of Bosnia and even got their first point at the World Cup, their first win at the World Cup, and a first time making it to the round of 16. Sure, they ended up losing to Morocco, but what they have achieved was still admirable. I think given that their players are young, they will qualify for the World Cup more often after that. I do think the United States, Mexico, and Canada will be the three teams that will mostly qualify for the World Cup from North America next time. Okay, number 28, I had Ecuador. Now, at first, I honestly wasn't expecting Ecuador to make it out of the group, considering that they lost to Ivory Coast and then tied with Curacao. But then they ended up giving us one of the fairy tales of the whole tournament, where they beat Germany themselves and made it to the round of 32. At the end, they lost to Mexico, like I predicted in the round of 32 predictions. However, I still think that it was nice that they beat Germany. Nice for them. And honestly, I'm happy that instead of them beating Curacao, they ended up tying with Curacao because then they sold that victory over Germany narrative. I think that if Ecuador finds a good striker, not just defense, they will do better next time. Because this time they had really good defense, but really bad strikers. Not really bad, but they score less goals than they could have. I'm really curious to see the best of Ecuador in 4 years when they will hopefully have better strikers. But for right now, thank you to them for beating Germany, but unfortunately they didn't end up going far. I'm really curious to see who takes charge of the national team now that Sebastian de Concesa is out. But I'm hopeful that they can find a good manager and do better. Okay, number 27, I have South Korea. Now, many people are favoring South Korea to get second or even first place. But I actually correctly predicted that South Korea will finish third. The only thing is that I didn't predict below whom they would finish. I thought that Czechia would be the one to finish second, and it actually ended up being South Africa that finished second. I think a whole series of things didn't end up going in South Korea's way. First of all, Son Heung-min didn't have such a good of a tutorment, and I do think that they got unlucky with their goalkeeper mistakes. Right now, many people are blaming Hon Myung-bo for the failure, and I do think that it's partially his fault, but it would be wrong to blame him for everything. Heung-min Son is a good player overall, and I absolutely respect him, but I think this World Cup with South Korea shows that his time is over. Again, no offense to him. I think what he did before was admirable, and he did the best that he could, but everyone has to retire sometimes. I do think that now it's his turn to retire. Although it will be interesting, although South Korea's future I think is in good hands. Because they have some strikers such as the final striker. Okay, number 26, I got the Czech Republic. Now, the Czech Republic performed worse than I expected them to. After they beat Ireland and Denmark, I was expecting them to get third or maybe even second place, considering the easy group that they were put in. But they actually ended up getting fourth place. They absolutely lost to Mexico, lost to South Korea, and tied with South Africa. And many of the key players who we expected a lot from ended up not doing so good. I think the reason why I flopped with them is because I was too amazed by their performance in the qualification, but I didn't realize that in the World Cup the games would be much challenging. Of course, I expect for them to be challenging, but I didn't expect for them to be that much challenging. Now, I wouldn't necessarily hate on this Czechia team, because considering the fact that they qualified, it's an admirable achievement on its own. Because sometimes Czechia had even better teams, but they were not able to qualify. But I still think that they could have done better. I'm really hopeful that at the next Euros they could do better. Okay, number 25, I had Egypt. Now, Egypt ended up exceeding my expectations. I was expecting for them to get second place in the group, maybe go through the round of 32 if they are lucky, and then lost in the round of 16. But instead, they actually tied with Belgium and challenged them for that first place spot till the last moment, beaten Australia, and then came really close to beating Argentina by scoring 2 against them. To give you a perspective, even Spain scored only 1 against them. I think it's an admirable achievement, especially given that Mohamed Salah and Omar Marmoush didn't look as good as people were expecting them to, and didn't score as much goals. Marmoush barely scored anything at all, and Salah scored only against New Zealand. So I think, considering their situation, they could be proud of the tournament that they have. But at the end, they simply didn't have the experience to turn this into a 2-0 lead against Argentina into victory, and didn't end up going till the last moment, and at the end conceded 2. At number 24, I had Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now, Bosnia and Herzegovina didn't have the worst tournament. They qualified for the round of 32, but I wouldn't also say that it was the best tournament they had. Qualified for the round of 32 is an achievement, given that even teams like Uruguay didn't qualify, but I still think they could have done better. Against the USA, they had an advantage in players, but they couldn't do much. Now, I was expecting for the USA to win that match, but I was expecting for Bosnia to score at least one goal, and it ended in maybe a 2-1 victory. And instead it ended in a 2-0 victory, which made me happy as a United States fan, but I still think that speaking neutrally, Bosnia could have done better. Now, some of their players ended up having a good tournament, such as Alay Begovic and Bayraktarovic, but I was expecting more from other players such as Demirovic. I think Bosnia's future is in a good hands with Alay Begovic and Bayraktarovic. I don't know if they will qualify for the World Cup regularly, but I think they will at least qualify for the Euros in the future. But for now, this is what we have, unfortunately. And Emertin Demirovic and Adam Dzeko both didn't have the best of games. But for Dzeko, it's forgivable given his age, and Demirovic could have done better. Okay, number 23, I have Sweden. Sweden finished just about where I expected them to. Getting third place and then getting eliminated in the round of 32. Now, as to why, again, I already gave you my opinion. I think the plan to use both Isak and Gyökeres isn't working. I think if they have one striker, they could do better. Against weaker teams like Tunisia, the plan with 2 strikers absolutely worked, but against stronger teams, it just doesn't. And neither Isak nor Gyökeres ended up scoring anything against France, and neither against Netherlands. Sure, Sweden had a goal, but the Netherlands scored 5 on return. So for me, again, I already told you my opinion. I think the plan to use both Isak and Gyökeres just isn't working. I'm hopeful that next time Sweden can learn from their mistakes and do better. But for now, I wouldn't say they had the worst of tournament, but I still think that they could have done better. Okay, number 22, I had Senegal. Now, a whole bunch of things didn't end up going in Senegal's favor. First of all, they were placed in an absolute group of death with Norway and France. And second of all, some of their key players like Ibrahim Baye did good, but some of the key players like Sadio Mane, Kalidou Koulibaly, and Nicolas Jackson didn't end up showing the games that we expected from them. Mane and Koulibaly are already old by football standards, but I think Jackson could have done better, especially in the game against Norway. So I think given that three of their key players didn't do so well, given getting eliminated in the round of 32 against Belgium isn't that bad, especially considering that they led 2-0 for a long time. I think that the future of the Senegalese team is in good hands with players like Ismail Assar and Ibrahim Baye. Unfortunately, this time they got unlucky with their group, but I think next time they could absolutely finish even higher. Okay, number 21, I had Mexico. Now, unfortunately, Mexico didn't break the round of 16 curse, but they tried really hard. I predicted correctly that they would top the group, which I'm really proud of, and that they would beat Ecuador in the round of 32, but beating a team like England is hard, even in Mexico, and even though the game was played in Mexico and even though England was down a player. But I still think that given that Mexico only barely lost and showed a good game, they could be proud of what they have achieved. Unfortunately, they didn't break the round of 16 curse, but I think they still have a future in front of them with players like Brian Gutierrez, and Gilberto Moore. So I think eventually Mexico will break the round of 16 curse. People just have to be more patient. Okay, number 20, I had Colombia. And this is another one of my successes. Colombia ended up just about where I predicted them to. And actually, they ended up making it higher than Portugal. So I think they could be proud of what they have achieved, although they could have done better against Switzerland, but Switzerland has more experience and a lot of ways penalty is just a lottery, and Switzerland just ended up winning it due to more experience. But I think Colombia have a bright future in front of them with players like Luis Suarez and Luis Diaz. Okay, number 19, I had Austria. Now I have to be honest, Austria did worse than I expected. And the matter of fact is not the result itself. Losing in the round of 32 to a European champion is absolutely not bad. The matter is how they lost. Sure, they beat Jordan and tied with Algeria, but as soon as they met a top level opponent, they ended up losing. Against Argentina, they lost, and I wasn't expecting them to win, but I was at least expecting them to try their hardest. Instead, it looked at times as if they absolutely didn't want to play football, and they were like, Argentina is better than us anyway, so let's just chill and be prepared for next game. I'm seriously, that's what it looked like. No offense to the Austrians, but I barely saw any moments from them in the game against Argentina. And against Spain won 3-0 and it could have been an even higher score. And Austria had only one good moment in the game. I think the reason why I ended up underestimating Austria is why I ended up overestimating Austria is because they had an injury with They had an injury with Christopher Baumgartner, and Rannick decided not to call the replacement, and he was a vital player for this team. So I think that's why. Okay, number 18, I have the USA, which is a country I live in, and it's a country I cheer for. As you can see, I even have a USA shirt. Now, many people are hating on the USA after that game against Belgium, where they got absolutely demolished with a score of 4-1. And sure, I'm not trying to defend the USA here. As much as I cheer for them, that game against Belgium was just horrible. And that whole scandal with Balagun didn't ended up helping them, because before they could have at least said that they had Balagun, or before they could at least say that they lost because they didn't have Balagun, now they had Balagun but still lost. So I do think that they could have done better in that game. However, I also wouldn't say that it's wrong. I also would say that it's wrong to call US tournament bad, and it's wrong to judge the team by just that one game. In all their other games, they actually ended up looking really good. They beat Paraguay, and as we saw, Paraguay wasn't actually some random team. They ended up beating Germany. They beat Australia. Sure, they lost to Turkey, but they were not playing their strongest lineup. They beat Bosnia while being down a man. So I would not say that the US tournament was bad. I do think that the USA needs to train more to be able to put up good results against those big boys from Europe like Netherlands or Belgium. But I also think that it wasn't as bad as some people say it is. And it's wrong to judge the team by just that one game against Belgium. Okay, number 17, I had Turkey. And yes, this was another one of my massive flops. Now, I had to be honest, I knew that sometimes Turkey can flop, even if they have good players, because they are not that good as a team. But something told me that this time they would actually win, because their group wasn't hard. But I ended up flopping. I think there are multiple reasons as to why. First of all, massive pressure. Many times we thought how when a team is hyped up to be the dark horse of the tournament, they ended up failing. Like it happened with Ukraine at the 2024 Euros, or like it happened with Denmark at the 2022 World Cup. So I think it definitely happened to Turkey. Second of all, they got unlucky that their moments just didn't went into the gate, and as we say in Russian, у них был квадратный мяч, meaning that they had a ball in the form of a square. It's just an idiom, of course, but you get what I'm saying. I think the reason why I flopped with them is because I look too much at individual players like Yildiz and Güler, while not looking at how they would do as a team. I think it's important not to hate on Turkey too much, considering the group that they were in, because in their group, Paraguay, who advanced, ended up knocking out the favorites, one of the favorites, Germany, and USA ended up making it to the round of 16. So I wouldn't hate on Turkey too much, but I also would say that they need a little bit of improvement, because how they did in this game wasn't good. I think that Turkey will have another chance, given that right now they have good players like Güler and Yildiz, but next time they need to prepare more. Okay, number 16, I have Norway. Norway actually ended up exceeding my expectations because considering that they didn't have the best goalkeeper nor the best defense, I wasn't expecting them to beat a big boy of football like Brazil. But they actually ended up doing that. I mean, I knew Erling Haaland was good, but I wasn't expecting him to carry the team as far as beating Brazil, considering the problems they had. Unfortunately, they did end up getting eliminated by England because Gehi and Stones found the recipe against Haaland, but I still think that given that before they never qualify, they can be proud of what they have achieved. Okay, number 15, I had Switzerland. And that is another thing I can be proud of. I correctly predicted for Switzerland to be high. Sure, they had an easy draw, but at the end, an easy draw doesn't guarantee anything and they still have to show off their results. The fact that they beat Colombia with their star players, I think is admirable. And it shows that if you give your manager time, they can achieve something. I think it was good that they gave Yakin time. Unfortunately for them, they did end up getting eliminated to Argentina, but I think what they did was still good, and I still think that in the future they could do something in the upcoming Euros, so maybe at the World Cup. Okay, number 14, I had Morocco. Now, in the group stage, Morocco didn't look so convincing. They just barely beat Scotland, and Haiti took the lead against them. So I was expecting them to be eliminated by the Netherlands. But they actually exceeded my expectation and eliminated the Netherlands and Canada, who came after them. And they got eliminated by France. So right now, I think Morocco is a very good team, but they still need to work on playing those big boys of football like France, because they lost to them twice already. Now, unfortunately, a whole bunch of things didn't end up going in their way, with Nayef Agert being injured before the tournament and Ismail Saibari during the tournament. But I think given that they had injuries, they did really good. I think that in the future, Morocco absolutely has a huge potential, but they still need to work on playing those big countries in football. If they continue their project, then in the next couple of cycles, I absolutely expect them to make it far and maybe even go as far as winning the World Cup. Because right now they have a huge potential with naturalized players from France and a team who just won the Youth World Cup. So I absolutely do think they have potential, but they still need to work on some things. Again, number 13, I have Japan. Now, Japan got eliminated in the round of 32, but I think they got unlucky with, first of all, the fact that three of their key players didn't go to the tournament and Takefuso Kuba was injured later. And second of all, that they had to play a big boy of football like Brazil that early. I do think that Japan still did decently good, considering the amount of problems that they had before the tournament. I'm hopeful that in 4 years they can finally take all of their best players and they can achieve more. But for now, unfortunately, they ended up getting eliminated in the round of 32. Okay, at number 12, I had Ivory Coast. And this is another one of my massive flops, unfortunately. I was expecting for Ivory Coast to be one of the dark horses at the tournament, given the squad they have. And at first they justified my expectations. Beating Ecuador, almost beating Germany and only conceding the last moment, and beating Curacao. But unfortunately they got very unlucky with meeting a top level opponent like Norway all the way in the round of 32. I absolutely think that they could have. I absolutely think that if they met a less challenging opponent, they could have done better. For now, they did the best that they could, and Amad Diallo did really good for them. I do think that next time, if they face a less challenging opponent, they could advance. I think the reason why I ended up flopping with them is because I didn't estimate who they would meet in the round of 32. Okay, at 11th place I had Croatia. Now, unfortunately, Croatia didn't end up repeating the 2018 and 2022 success. Many Croatian fans are complaining that they got knocked out because of a string of hair. But guys, now look, I really don't wanna offend anyone from Croatia. I absolutely want that team to win someday. Because I am Slav and they are Slavs too, so I'm not really hating on Croatia, but I have to be honest with the truth right now. How they played at this World Cup wasn't convincing. They only barely beat teams like Ghana and Panama, and this is considering that Ghana didn't have Thomas Partey or Mohamed Kudus. Oh no, sorry, Ghana had Thomas Partey for the third game, but they still didn't have Mohamed Kudus. And then they ended up getting knocked out to Portugal. So I think to say that Croatia got knocked out because of a stream of hair is wrong. Because Croatia didn't show off as convincing game as they could, and as a result didn't end up going as far as many people thought. I think they could have done better against the likes of Panama and Ghana. So I don't think that Croatia got knocked out just because of a stream of hair. I think it was because they didn't show off the results against Ghana and Panama. Right now, I honestly don't know what will happen with Croatia. Because Zlatko Dalic left and they got Slovan Bilic, who isn't the worst manager, but he also hasn't had success in the last years. So for now, I don't know what will happen to Croatia. Unfortunately, they don't have as good of a generation as Modric's generation was. But I got to be optimistic for my fellow Slavs. I do think that Croatia still has some potential given the young players like Baturina and Guardiola. So I think that Croatia will show off some results, but I don't think this tournament was their best one. Again, no offense to Croatia, I absolutely want them to win the World Cup someday, but for now, I think they need an update, and the Modric generation deserves a break. Okay, number 10, I had Uruguay. And this is another one of my massive flops. Now, if I were to explain why I flopped, I wanna say that it's for the following reason. First of all, I didn't estimate correctly how important Luis Suarez is for that team. I think the decision not to take Luis Suarez was absolutely wrong. And had Suarez been in this World Cup, he absolutely could have scored those goals against Cape Verde and allowed Uruguay to advance. And I think Bielsa, with his decision not to call Suarez, can be blamed for that. But also, I think the problem is the situation inside of the Uruguayan teams themselves. Because Bielsa had a conflict with Valverde and other players. Now, who to blame for that? I think, as we say in Russian, когда авария, виноваты оба. When there is a crash, both are at fault. So I wouldn't say that Bielsa is the only one to blame, or that the players are the only ones to blame. I would say both have a role to play. Federico Valverde, I'm really disappointed in him because he ended up organizing a revolt twice in a season. First, he participated in the Real Madrid revolt, where sure he wasn't the main organizer, but he was one of the people who got Xabi Alonso sacked. And then the same situation in the Uruguay team revolt, where he didn't like how Bielsa was trained. And he is turning his image from a working horse on the field who could help his team to a rebellious player who refuses to work hard. I don't wanna hate on any player too much. I still think that he has the potential to turn things around, and he still had some remarkable moments, such as the hat-trick against Man City. But he really needs to think about his situation. If he continues at this rate, he can tarnish his reputation in both Uruguay itself and his club career. Right now, Uruguay hired Farlan. Maybe he is the right fit for this team, considering that, for example, Real Madrid hired Zidane and they did really good, but I really don't know. For now, I wouldn't rate him too much higher. I do think that Uruguay could challenge for a spot in South America, but they need to find a new generation of players. Okay, number 9, I had Brazil. At first, Brazil ended up doing as high as I expected them to. Topping the group, beating Japan, sure, barely, but still. But then they ended up getting eliminated by Norway. Some people are blaming Ancelotti for that, but I think it's wrong to do it. Ancelotti did the best that he could, considering that this is not Brazil's most talented generation. The only thing that I would blame Ancelotti for is his decision not to call João Pedro. I do think that had they had Pedro, he could have scored against Norway. But other than that, I think he did the best that he could. I think the reason why Brazil got eliminated is because Unfortunately, their players focus too much on their private lives instead of soccer. And Rafinha's injury didn't help the situation. I do think that in the future Brazil will win another World Cup, but that will be another time. For right now, I think that unfortunately this generation of Brazilian players is not the strongest. No offense to anyone from Brazil. I I really like some of your players like Rafinha, but I do think that the players they need to work on focusing on soccer more instead of their prestige. Okay, number 8 I had Belgium. And at first it looked like Belgium would be one of my flops. Because they tied with Egypt, and let's be honest, Egypt looked like the better team in that game. Then they tied once again with Iran, but then at the end they got the situation under control when it matters most and demolished New Zealand. And then in the round of 32, they beat Senegal. Now, sure, against Senegal, it was just luck, but against the United States, as much as it hurts for me to say, they truly showed their best result. And for Balogun red card situation gave them more motivation. So I think Belgium actually ended up performing better than many people expected them to, especially considering that they were the only ones who scored a goal against the future champions Spain. And especially given that their key players like Jeremy Doku didn't do so well. Right now, unfortunately, I don't think that Belgium will win the World Cup, given the generation they have, but I do think that they will end up showing some good results and qualifying for competitions. Number 7, I have Argentina. Now, Argentina actually did far better than I expected them to, reaching all the way to the final. Sure, many people could say that they had an easy draw, but I don't think it's the fault of FIFA who were purposefully helping them. I think it's the fault of their opponents. Had Uruguay not flopped, they could have faced Uruguay in the round of 32. Had Egypt shown better results with their key players like Mo Salah and Omar Marmoush doing better, they could have absolutely defeated Argentina. Or had Turkey not failed in the group. So I think Argentina's easy opponent is not the fault of FIFA, it's the fault of their opponents themselves, who ended up failing when they didn't have to. And the team had a huge motivation. Although I was predicting for it to be much lower given that they already won the World Cup. Unfortunately for them, they didn't end up winning the World Cup, but I think they can be proud of what they have achieved. Given that other future champions like Germany in 2018 or Italy in 2010 ended up failing. Again, number 6, I had Netherlands. And yes, this is another one of my massive flop. The German economists said that they would win the World Cup, and at first it actually looked like they could actually do it, because they tied with Japan and could have beaten them had it not been for their goalkeeper. They absolutely demolished Sweden and beat Tunisia. So at first it looked like they would go on much farther. Now Morocco was not an easy opponent, let's be honest, but I still thought the Netherlands could win it. But at the end, Ronald Koeman decided to pick the wrong tactic and decided to wait for a penalty at all cost instead of actually trying to do something. As a result, the Netherlands ended up getting eliminated. I honestly don't know why Koeman ended up picking the tactic of waiting for a penalty, given that that was how the Netherlands got eliminated in 2022 and in 2014. But maybe he knows something that we don't know. I think the reason why I ended up flopping with the Netherlands because I didn't understand how how much of a role does the managerial position play for them, and that Ronald Koeman isn't the right man for a job. Now, I'm not trying to hate Ronald Koeman too much. I would say he is a good manager, but only for medium clubs like, say, Everton or Valencia. For a top team like the Netherlands, I think they could find a better manager. Right now, they already fired Koeman. It will be interesting to see who the next manager will be, but I think they still have a high potential. After given that the players that they have, especially in the defense. Okay, number 5, I had Germany. And yes, this was another one of my massive flop. I went for high stars like Wirtz, Musiala, and others, but at the end, what mattered more wasn't the names but the tactic. Julian Nagelsmann decided to play like in the Euro 2024, but the only problem with that is that in the Euro 2024 they had Kroos, and in 2026 they don't have a Kroos-like figure. So I think that was why they got eliminated. And no one was brave enough to take that penalty against Paraguay, and then Taj decided to score in the air. I think it's not tasteful, but he shouldn't. So I'm not saying he's the one to blame, but he shouldn't be the main penaltist of the team. A striker should have taken it more often. Now, the good news for anyone from Germany is that right now Jurgen Klopp is coming to the team, and Jurgen Klopp is known to have massive turnarounds. For example, he took Liverpool when it was a top club but not super top and turned it around. So I think he could absolutely do the same with Germany. So I do think that Germans have something to be optimistic for, but this wasn't their best World Cup. And I think the reason why I ended up flopping with them is because I didn't estimate what tactic Nagelsmann would pick. Okay, number 4, I had England. Many people were skeptical about England given that they didn't take their key players such as Palmer, and people were even saying jokingly that Tuchel is a German spy, but he ended up shutting the mouth to most haters by qualifying for third place, which was something England hasn't done in a long time. England hasn't had a medal of the World Cup since 1966. I do think that England could have absolutely beaten Argentina had Tuchel not chosen a strategy to hold on to the score 1-0 at all costs. I think that was a horrible strategy because Argentina is known to come back. For example, they came back from the score 2-0 against Egypt. Of course, they could easily came back from the score 1-0. and that was what costed Tuchel points. Against France, he learned his lesson, and even after the team got up 1-0, he still continued to try to score more. And it paid off. England got third place. I think that this England team has some potential, and I'm really happy that Kane at least got a bronze medal at the World Cup. I think if Kane comes in for more years, maybe he can even win the World Cup. Maybe the team will play the same way as they did as Argentina did with Messi, and do everything they can to bring their captain the World Cup. For now, I think third place was absolutely good, although I still think that if they took some of their key players like Cole Palmer, they would have done better. Okay, number 3, I had Portugal. And this was one of the heartbreaks of the whole tournament. Portugal was the second team I was rooting for after the USA, because I really wanted for Cristiano Ronaldo to win the World Cup. And they absolutely had a crazy potential, with midfielders like Joao Neves and Vitinha and players like Cristiano Ronaldo. But at the end, they ended up bottling it. Against DR Congo, they tried their best to keep the score 1-0 instead of trying to score more, and as a result ended up tying. Against Colombia, they also tied. And the only team they beat was Uzbekistan. And Cristiano Ronaldo, after his famous I'm back line, didn't do anything against Colombia or Spain. And against Croatia, he only scored the penalty. So when I was talking about this Portugal team, I was saying that Portugal have the potential to win the whole tournament, but only if all players understand that sometimes they need to end up on the bench, including Cristiano Ronaldo. And unfortunately, Cristiano Ronaldo didn't understand that and wanted to play in every match, and this is part of the reason why we saw what we saw. For example, look at Messi. Messi doesn't just score goals, he gave assists too. For example, how he did against England, where even though he didn't score any goals, his 2 assists were decisive. Ronaldo just wants to score goals all the time, and he has learned to give assists more often, but he doesn't understand that sometimes he needs to end up on the bench. Now, don't get me wrong, is Cristiano Ronaldo the only one to blame for Portuguese problems? Absolutely not. In fact, I think the number one person to blame is Roberto Martinez, because he didn't end up finding the right scheme for this squad. Now I'm absolutely the number one person to blame is Roberto Martinez, also some other players. So I would not say that it's all Cristiano Ronaldo's fault, but unfortunately, he definitely played a role in it. And I don't wanna hate on him too much. I still think he's one of the best players who ever stepped on the soccer field, even if not the best in history. But unfortunately, I don't think he will win the World Cup. Again, I still have a lot of respect for him, but I think he could have done better in terms of the World Cup performance. I'm really heartbroken to see him not win. Fortunately for him, Portugal still have a chance in 2030. Maybe he can still come as a bench player and maybe score a couple of goals and win as a player, as a reserve player, and be a mental leader for that team. But unfortunately, I don't think that's happening because no player before him has managed to go to that many World Cups. Although I really want that to happen. I still think that this Portuguese team has massive potential, but they need to think about their technique. Okay, number two, I had France. And France did end up getting fourth place. Many people are criticizing this French team, saying that they flopped as soon as they met the first serious opponents. And before that, they had easy opponents, but I still think that this French team is really decent, and they just got a little unlucky with their opponents. Or sorry, they just got a little unlucky in the semi-final and the game for third place. But I still think that the fact that they failed in those games is not a reason to say that they did absolutely bad. Because a fourth place is still good, no matter what opponents you get. I still think that France is one of the favorites to win the Euro 2028, as much as I of course want my home country of Ukraine to win. And I still think this French team has a lot of potential. It will be interesting to see what Zinedine Zidane shows with this team. Again, number one, I had Spain. Yay to me, I correctly predicted who would win the World Cup. I might have not correctly predicted some places, but I correctly predicted the winner. After the first game against Cape Verde, I was really skeptical of my own prediction because they didn't score without Lamine Yamal. But then at the end, the La Fuente proved to me that I was actually wrong. They scored many goals and Yamal didn't contribute to most of them, only to the game against Saudi Arabia. So at the end, I think that what Spain achieved was very good. And I especially liked that the after of the goal in the final was Ferran Torres, the player who everyone has been hating on, including his own grandfather, just gave a very good result. What a happy end. So Spain ended up exceeding my expectations because after the game with Cape Verde, I was starting to doubt them. And what's even more important is that they eliminated many good teams like Portugal with Cristiano Ronaldo, France with Mbappe, and at the end Messi in the final. Huge congratulations to them, and De La Fuente ended up proving to skeptics why his decision to start Cucurella and Simon over Raya and Grimaldo was actually right. I am happy that Spain beat Argentina because I think that other teams deserve a chance and Argentina already had a World Cup. The only thing I'm concerned is that now that Yamal has both the Euros and the World Cup, I wonder if he will have any motivations to continue. because he already achieved what many players have not achieved yet. Even dictator Mbappe has not won the Euros. But I'm hopeful that we will not lose Yamal as the talent and that he will not go to Saudi Arabia or just not play good soccer at all after he has won everything and that we will still see him. Okay, so there you have it, guys. Overall, I absolutely think I could have done better with my predictions. But I think given that this was my first time, it wasn't that bad. Especially given that I ended up predicting correctly some close calls su- such as such as Mexico and Austria. Oh, by the way, what an embarrassing moment for me. I think I forgot to talk about Cape Verde. And I actually underestimated them, and they ended up doing better than I expected. They did what they achieved was very admirable. Unfortunately, I don't think that they will qualify again because I think the powerhouses of African football, like Nigeria and Cameroon, will end up catching up to them, and they will not have Vazinia 4 years later. But what they did was admirable. Yeah, guys, as you can see, I made a mistake by forgetting to talk about Cape Verde. Please forgive me for that because a long video can truly drain time and require a lot of energy. Right now, right now I'm a little tired after watching the final and going to the swimming pool, but I still wanted to give you my reactions fresh once right after I watched the final. So yeah, if you like this video, give it a thumb up. If you dislike it, give it a thumb down. Subscribe to my channel. Write comments. Once again, I want to say sorry that maybe I didn't have as much energy as I could have, but I'm recording this video right after I watched the final and went to the swimming pool. For me, it was urgent to record this video right the day off once I have the reactions. So yeah. Again, if you like this video, give it a thumb up. If you dislike it, give it a thumb down. Subscribe to my channel and stay updated for more videos. Bye guys. Have a good day.